And Drucker is credited with saying that the customer never buys what the company thinks it sells him. And the reason I think that's a really interesting quote, especially in the business center industry that you're in, is because it's easy to make assumptions that what you think you're doing, you're selling office space, you're selling a friendly service and reception, you're selling some basic infrastructure, access, software, laptops, meeting spaces, etc. But actually, there may be something entirely different that you're selling that's a psychological benefit. It isn't just a hardware answer. It may be something entirely different that is worth uncovering in terms of what is it that makes our clients excited. Why do they keep coming back, or why do they refer us? What is it that is the need that we're satisfying beyond a physical space and that infrastructure? And there definitely are those needs that exist, and the more you get behind them and uncover them, the more you can use that as your platform for creating points of difference. And I'll talk in a bit more detail in just a minute about that. But how you get there is by asking the right questions so that you ultimately can find out, what is that customer buying? So what are the intangibles that make our proposition different? And the more you can ask and survey and do your research to find that out, the better. And basically what you're trying to do is decide what is the space we want to occupy and how are we going to make sure that we articulate our value in that space we choose to be in. And the reason for all of these pictures is because these are the places where people do their work, as you know better than I do. You know, it's the back of an Addison Lee on the way to an airport or to a meeting. It's in the Hilton Lounge. I recently, going through Paddington Station, there's a Hilton there for any of you that have had the pleasure of walking through as a shortcut to get a taxi on the other side of that hotel. You see everybody using that lobby purely for business meetings. I don't think there's anybody there drinking coffee that they bought at the Hilton. They're just there having meetings. Obviously, the coffee shops, Starbucks and Pret and all of the Cafe Neros and all the others are impromptu meeting places. And then, you know, the phone increasingly, the airport lounges, and of course, your own sofa. So you are competing with all of those places where people are choosing to do their work, when in fact you could make a case, and I no doubt are making the case, that this is not where good business gets done. This is not where clear thinking happens. This is not where rich, high-touch interpersonal exchanges are really going on. And that is fantastic for you as a source of difference because you're providing the venue and all of the other amenities that make these rich dialogues happen face-to-face rather than in a lot of virtual settings. Going back to some of the things that you mentioned about people entering and encroaching into the business center arena from the unlikely parts of industry. You know, you've got, as you may know already, Barclays has Eagle Labs. So Barclays are trying to repurpose and make the most out of their leases when they're closing branches and turning those actually into office space like tech hubs for certain of their client base. Very smart idea, leverages a fixed asset. Why wouldn't you do that? But again, here's a bank, a retail bank, that's getting into the serviced office business. So what will that look like in the future? How will they leverage banking, if at all, and offer those services to that kind of customer? We'll see. Similarly, you've got apps. Headbox is one of them, as you all probably know, where you can book space pretty spontaneously. And you have different suppliers who are putting kind of like a hotel booking system, a bit like Expedia, but for office space. So we have a meeting room in our company on the 5th floor. It's often empty. I might as well just, you know, let it out, assuming there's some security behind the bookings, and get a 20, 30, 40 pounds for letting people use that space. So there's some really interesting innovations going on in your arena where there's almost like a spot market for office space. So that will no doubt develop over time as well. So here's the secret recipe according to my experience. Clearly define the customer problem you're solving. Now that sounds really straightforward. Sure, we know what the problem is. They need a space. No, they don't. They need convenience. They need friendship. They need help. They need a tour guide. They need a concierge to run their stuff down to the dry cleaner. That's what people maybe need, not just a space. Create a customer experience that is these 4 things. It's got to be consistent, so across all your locations, what you're promising in one has to run through all of them. Intentional, it's planned, you've thought about it. There's no accidental, oh, maybe we could do that. I'll look into it. No, you have a fixed menu that you've thought about based on what the needs are of your consumer or your guest or your occupier. Different, well, we've just been talking about some brands that are very clear in their position in the market that are profoundly different from each other, that have created a space. And then value adding. So something in the interaction with your business center or chain of business centers needs to add value to me. It's got to be more than, like I say, just a space. Processes and designs. Think about how you do your role. Think about how a client finds you and signs up, and that journey and that experience. Is it easy? Is it complicated? Is it friendly? What's the tone? How does that all feel and work from their perspective? You can use that as a foundation for being different. Study other services businesses. So it doesn't need to be in the hospitality realm. It could be legal. It could be property companies. It could be all sorts of other advisory firms. How do they do their business, and how do they make a mark that's different from other people? Let's see, innovation and listening. So it's about how the culture that you encourage and that you drive through your staff and through everyone in your enterprise. Investing in that ongoing learning, keeping people up to date on some of the VUCA trends and disruptions that are on the horizon. This next point is about hiring for attitude, not aptitude. So in my experience, and in the experience of many of my clients, if they hire for the person's outlook and mindset and willingness, then all that technical learning and technical stuff will come. But because you've hired for that willingness to help the occupier or the client, fantastic. It's easier to do that than to hire for the experience and then not have the attitude that's needed, really. And then invest in protecting what makes you different. Sustainable competitive advantage. Again, a little more management consulting jargon, but what does that mean? It means that there's something in your DNA that's uniquely you. And if you're not sure what that is in your enterprise, you'd better find it, and you'd better invest in developing it and keeping it and registering it. Finally, track your success. So what kinds of things could you track? You could track referrals. You could reward those referrals. You could create a net promoter score in your business. In other words, the difference between those that are advocating minus those that are defecting. Hopefully that's a positive number in most of your, if not hopefully all of your cases. But by tracking it, it means you're monitoring it and you're gauging who's advocating and rewarding them versus what you can do to correct the ones that are leaving and why some of your clients may be leaving. Find out where they go and identify the cost for recruitment. So one of the things that could be really interesting is when you do that calculation, you may find that you can ideally narrow down which leads and which new occupiers and clients were referred from which efforts of yours. Is it advertising? Is it the hotel concierge down the road? Is it a friend? And how much it costs you to recruit one of those new occupiers or tenants. And then, because you know that formula, you invest in those channels.